1923 returned this week with the second episode of Season 2, and as Elsa Dutton stated herself, we saw the Yellowstone Ranch in a type of hell that goes against the traditional images of rivers of fire. This was a type of hell that starved you, stalked you, and if you didn't freeze or starve to death, the devil, which in this instance was personified by the wolf, would hunt you down and make you suffer. With an episode that showed us Spencer getting one step closer to his family and Banner also being fearful of the very person that he's on the same side of as he looks to gain more and more power. Let's dive into the episode and break down all that there was to take away from it. Here is 1923 Season 2 Episode 2 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Cara and Elizabeth. Cara and Elizabeth had an interesting journey in this episode, as both of their characters pretty much serve as the two different ways that the harshness of the winter can be perceived whilst living on the ranch. Cara is well used to it by now and takes it in her stride. Whilst fully aware of the harshness that it can bring, she looks forward to the spring and the fruits of their labor and the beauty that it brings. However, Elizabeth sees what they're doing at the moment as not living, nor even surviving, more like struggling. She's been bitten by a wolf and was stared down and almost hunted by a mountain lion, showing that she's viewed as the prey when in that territory. It's taken Cara Dutton 2 separate occasions to show her strength and that she can withstand all that this frozen hell brings. With Cara and Elizabeth, we saw that at the end of the episode, the very wolf that took a bite out of Elizabeth earlier on in the episode returned, and it managed to get into the house, which made the home feel the conditions of the outside and gave the wolf the freedom to hunt. So much so that this time, instead of just getting the chickens from the coop, it devoured the nurse that was there to give Elizabeth the rabies shot while she slept, and it made a jump for Cara too. We didn't see if she ended up surviving the attack, but we did hear the gun go off. I'm predicting that Cara will survive it because, as we've seen, she's the strongest one there and is able to survive in those conditions. The wolf felt metaphorical of the harsh winter, and no winter is going to claim Cara Dutton. Elizabeth, however, she mentioned that no matter how much she loved Jack, she couldn't stay at the ranch anymore due to the threat that was there and the fact that she felt like she wasn't going to survive. So once the bitterness of the storm passes, I think we will see her leave. Banner and Whitfield. Banner and Whitfield are definitely two interesting characters for sure, and within this episode, Whitfield saw the Norwegian skiers that Banner allowed to ski on the mountain, and he saw it as an opportunity to make money. Prior to this happening, he spoke of livestock being the toil of peasants because of the risk of things going wrong, such as Banner with a singular worm causing his flock to be infected, which meant that they all needed to be killed, despite Banner actually risking his life for them in Season 1. Whitfield almost represents the change in times and the opportunity that was there for the people that viewed the world in the way that he did. This is why we saw Banner at the end saying how he feared him and that he's the only person in his life that he's ever been scared of, because he knew that Whitfield would walk through anybody in order to get what he desired, which was gold. I wonder if this is something that's going to put Banner up against Whitfield and cause him to go against him out of fear, something that could lead to some double-crossing occurring. I think it just might. Spencer and Alex. With regards to Alex, we didn't see much of her in this episode. She only featured at the end when we saw her on board the ship and was heading towards the United States to be closer to Spencer. Her section was pretty much focused on her putting herself through the risk of travel in order to be with the person that she cared for, and I'd say that it pretty much mirrored the same thing that Spencer was doing to be with his family. With Spencer arriving at land with Luca, we saw that he met Luca's cousin, an individual that we found out was a Mafia boss. Spencer accepted the hospitality and warm welcome as Luca told his cousin that Spencer saved his life. But after Spencer was done, he actually ended up getting into a fight with one of the henchmen that wasn't allowing him to leave. This saw Spencer eventually being beaten, but him making a deal with Luca's cousin, the boss. It turned out that Luca's family was involved with the transportation of whiskey. This was something that came with risk because at the time, prohibition was in place. We actually saw the importance placed on that in this episode with the judge secretly having whiskey in his drawer and it being used against him. But with Spencer seemingly adopting more missions on the side before he eventually makes it back to the ranch, we saw that he was able to go free from the Mafia, but he had to deliver their whiskey to Fort Worth. I imagine along the way he's definitely going to get into some kind of trouble. Trouble seems to follow Spencer, and with him transporting illegal goods, it's definitely not going to be a smooth journey. Jacob Dutton. With Jake, we saw that he rescued Zane following him being arrested for being married to Asami Ashikaga. There was a focus in this episode about white people and Native Americans being married and how it was viewed as a crime. We also saw this being brought up with Renaud and Marshall Kent, and how Kent didn't like the idea of Native Americans taking their women, to quote him directly. It showed the view that he had and the reluctance to accept change. He was a bigot, and he represented a large mindset back then. He even had an opinion on the fact that the marshal in Oklahoma was a woman. So again, this story was almost a vessel of showing that times were changing, and that there was friction with it being accepted by the majority of people. After Jacob rescued Zane and his family and said that they could stay at his ranch, they set off back home, but the blizzard kicked in and we saw that they needed to flip their wagon and release their horses in order to stay warm for the night. This again showed the harsh side of the winter and the deadly nature that it can have, and how one decision can be deadly. I don't think that they're gonna die out there though. I think they'll make it through the night, and if the storm passes, they'll find their horses and go back home. Teonna didn't have as much of a focus in this episode when compared to episode 1. We probably spent more time with the marshal that was hunting her down. But what we did see with Teonna was that she wanted to stay on the ranch rather than going to the Comanche reservation. She didn't want to go because she knew that there were schools, priests, and police that would be there and that they'd do the same to her as to what they did before. So it seems like for now they're going to stay put where they are. However, with Marshall Kent and Renaud having a deep conversation about the view of Native Americans and the fact that there was citizenship being given to the natives that were born in the United States, something that Kent didn't agree with or want because he viewed them as second-class citizens and didn't want them to be a part of society. Ultimately comparing them to black people at the time and saying that he didn't think that they deserved it either. Even with Renaud mentioning the Andalusian people and the region that was ruled by black people in Europe for hundreds of years, they saw it as some kind of joke and that it wouldn't have been possible. It's something that really shows the mindset of Kent and how many other people thought at the time too. With the worker in Oklahoma drawing up posters of Teonna, I feel like that's going to be something that will likely come back to get her because people are now going to be aware of her face as she travels around. Kent's numbers are diminishing following the attack on him, and there's now only 2 of them, so his pack is getting weaker. My review of the episode. I thought this was a good episode of 1923. I'm just really glad it's back on our screens, to be honest, but it is bittersweet because it's obviously the final season of the show, and the Duttonverse doesn't really seem to have much more going for it after this. So I'm just hoping there's more in the pipeline. One of my complaints with this show is that there's probably just one too many stories to be able to keep up with. It ultimately means that we end up chopping around a bit more than what we'd expect, and some stories don't get the attention that they need. We only really ever get bits of each one, rather than it all feeling like one big interconnected one. I thought the scene with the wolf at the beginning was executed so well. It was menacing and it genuinely felt like Elizabeth was going to be mauled at that moment. I felt the panic and fear that she had as she was trying to close the gate, and the wolf just looked utterly terrifying. I'd probably say that the story that I like the most is the one that's set in Montana. It's at the core of the show and it's the reason I watch it. The focus on nature being the villain in this episode and it being the breaker of men and women was something that I really liked. It was powerful and it was quite poetic with the way that it all unfolded. Did Cara survive? Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see in the next episode. So, there you have it. 1923 Season 2 Episode 2 Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos on 1923, such as the entirety of Season 1 being broken down, then click on the card in the top corner. There'll be a playlist there. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for tuning into this week's breakdown of 1923, and I'll see you in the next one.